Good day. I'm Andrea Spindle, Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation and co-chair of End Jew Hatred Canada. Welcome to today's web talk with Dr. Charles Jacobs, entitled The Failure of Jewish Leadership, What is to be Done? Charles has been widely published, including in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Jerusalem Post, and the Encyclopedia Britannica, and has appeared on many local and national television and radio broadcasts. And we're extremely thrilled to be able to welcome him today from his home in Boston. Charles.
The situation for Jews today in the West is quite serious. Everywhere we are under ideological and increasingly physical assault. Many Jews are in shock. America was supposed to be the Golden Medina, the Golden Land. It was said it could never happen here, but something very bad is happening here. Over the last few years, Jews have been murdered and assaulted on America's streets. Jewish buildings have been stormed with gunfire. Even before this latest surge of Jew hatred coming from the Gaza war propaganda, crimes against Jews were already more than 60% of crimes against all religious targets. Crimes against Muslims, by comparison, constituted about 15%. Even before the Gaza war, every Jewish building in America required security. That's not the country I grew up in, or we grew up in. Soon, maybe no Jew will think he lives in the Golden Medina. Then did come the Gaza war and its blood libel that Jews in Israel are needlessly killing innocent children, with pictures that supposedly prove it. This defamation is being blared daily from mainstream press and has gone viral on social media. This defamation most recently has led to a slew of physical attacks on Jews in broad daylight. You people in Canada have seen this in Toronto at the Nathan Phillips Square. It's much, much worse in Europe, where caravans of Islamists with Palestinian flags drive slowly through Golders Green, the Jewish quarter in London, for example, where they scream, "F the Jews, and we will rape their daughters." You can also see photos of Jews being beaten in the streets of New York, sometimes daily. So as we meet here today, an alliance of left-wing progressives and Muslim anti-Zionists, which we should come to understand and call them a red-green alliance, red for the communists, red for the left, green for the Muslims, is using the scenes of the destruction in Gaza to instill hatred for Israel and its Jewish supporters throughout American society and Canadian society and European society. More and more Americans will be less and less likely to protect and defend the Jews. The Red-Green Alliance is seemingly an anomaly. How can it be that people on the left who are for gender fluidity, for nipple rings and bikinis and free love can unite with, and for LGBT, can unite with people for whom those would be crimes that would get you thrown off the roof or stoned in the Muslim world? Well, it seems illogical, but anti-Semitism has glued in the past many strange things together, and it's glued together now, the left, the far left, and the Islamic radicals. The Gaza war now has got us, the Gaza war propaganda has got us to what I think is a tipping point. The status quo is simply unsustainable. I came here to tell you the story of how this happened to us. It's a partial story because there are external causes over which we had no control. The main one, of course, is the defeat of classical liberalism by a force known by many names: postmodernism, progressivism, political correctness, wokeism. That is and has been defeating classical liberals and classical liberalism for the longest time now, and it is happening across Western civilization. It is very bad for the Jews. but that is a topic for another lecture. That's the external threat. Today, I want to concentrate on the problem that was and still is within our power. That is the failure of Jewish leadership. So the ideological war against the Jewish state started in the media and on campuses decades ago. Now, 30 years on, we've lost almost every major cultural and political institution in America. You know, we've lost the media, we've lost the campuses, we've lost the liberal churches, we've lost the high schools, and now we've lost the supportive half of the Democratic Party, the energetic half, the surging half. How did it happen that the Jews, who are supposed to be the best storytellers, the best PR people, the best lawyers and reasoners, how did it happen that we failed to make Israel's case? Daniel Pipes asks it this way. You should remember this quote. Whoever, he said a few years ago, whoever would have imagined 100 years ago that the Jews would make the best soldiers and the Arabs the best publicists? That's what happened. Let's start with the media. In 1989, Andrea Levin and I were preparing to launch the Boston branch of CAMERA, Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting in America, to fight the media bias against Israel. The Boston Globe was bashing Israel daily. Here's just one story. So an Arab was carrying a bomb that he was going to throw at Jews. The bomb blew up in his face. He was arrested and convicted. So what was the Boston Globe headline? Israelis convict blind Palestinian. I have a copy of that. I didn't make it up. Andrea Levin wrote a terrific column about the Boston Globe, covering it broadly and documenting every one of, or many of, the horrible things that it was doing. She's terrific. And we were about to launch the Boston branch of a media watchdog, CAMERA. Suddenly, however, we were approached by two very important people close to the ADL. One's name is Lenny ZAKIM. There's a ZAKIM bridge in Boston who's named after him. And the other was Steve Grossman, who was at one point Secretary of State or the Treasury in Massachusetts. He was a leader in AIPAC nationally. They came to us, they said, don't do it. Don't do this Boston branch of a media watchdog. Let the ADL take it on. And here was their quote, let the ADL be the ADL for Israel. Why? Because they said, if it was the ADL that told the world that the New York Times and the Boston Globe and the Washington Post and the LA Times were cheating on the Jewish state, that would really matter because they speak, the ADL speaks in the name of America's Jews, which was true, and we agreed. And we were prepared to work with the ADL, but let them have this as an important mission. But the ADL's head, Abe Foxman, he declined. And I suppose he declined because he needed his letters to be published in the New York Times. He couldn't afford to be calling them out and get his letters published. I guess he didn't want to upset his donors, many of whom were older Holocaust survivors and could only think of anti-Semitism as coming from the Nazis. Many of his donors might have been on the left, happy to fight Nazis, but also happy that Israel was being hectored a bit, to make it a better place and all. Whatever the reasons, Abe Foxman didn't do it. So that was the new anti-Semitism. The new anti-Semitism is making Israel the Jew among nations. We'll get to that in a minute. But I want to posit to you today, people who write about American Jewish history will recognize this choice that Foxman made was the exact moment that the American Jewish community's power and influence began to decline. ADL's decision not to speak in the name of the Jewish community against the Jewry's biggest defamers at the time, the mainstream media, which trumpeted lies and slanders daily. The minute that they refused to say that to the American public, from the voice of the Jewish community, that the media were lying about the Jews, that moment in time marked the beginning of the decline of American Jewish fortunes. That was 1989. Now, meanwhile, I see that FOXMAN is much in the news. He announced that he canceled his subscription when he saw that picture that we had as the other slide, which was the New York Times blood libel that the Jews are killing innocent Palestinian children needlessly. So he canceled his subscription. Well, that was good, but it was 35 years late. He also told the New York Times, he also told the Times of Israel, David Horowitz, who's the editor of the Times of Israel, did a long interview with FOXMAN just a few days ago. And FOXMAN says, the problem for us now is that Israel has no vision. The fact of the matter is that it was FOXMAN who had no vision. So that's when our Defense Department, the ADL, as you know, is the American Jewish Defense Department. In every Jewish city, we have federations, which were supposed to be kind of the welfare department of the Jewish community. They were collecting money from the left and the right to help out with PARV, non-political communal needs, take care of SAFTA in the old age home. So they were not the warriors. They were not the warriors. The ADL was the warriors, and they withdrew from the battlefield. And a vacuum was created at that moment, very soon after 1989. And what happened was, wonderful Jewish activists, some of the best people that we have, tried to fill the void by creating new organizations. They tried to stick their fingers in a dike as best they could. But as we see today, they could not hold back the flood of Jew hatred. Try as they might, and valiantly try as they might, we are not winning. After CAMERA, which is an immensely important and wonderful organization, then came the David Project, Stand With Us, Hasbara Fellows, and many more. And think Doc Emmett, film productions, Gloria Greenfield makes incredibly good films. If you haven't seen them, you have to see them. ZOA was always there, even before. Mort Klein is the one national Jewish leader who has no problem saying the truth about this. What's he say the truth about? Everything about Israel, but most very important, he says he has the guts, the courage to say that Jewish leaders are trying to, are failing to protect us, and Jewish leaders are trying to shut him up because of that. He's not allowed, we are not allowed to criticize Jewish leaders who are failing. Meanwhile, every Jewish leader thinks they have the right to criticize the elected representatives of the Jewish state. We can't criticize them, but they can criticize people who were actually elected. They were not elected. They're anointed by the donors. And so they're insisting that we not criticize them. It's pathetic. AIPAC 2, of course, was always there, but its mission was not to fight anti-Semitism. Its mission was to lobby Congress to support Israel. The defending the community was the chief and should have been the only mission of the very well-funded, today they have $100 million a year, ADL, which was now been taken over by a former Obama consultant, Jonathan Greenblatt, who has turned our Defense Department, the Defense Department of the Jewish people, into a Defense Department of the Democratic Party. For shame. I have to notice also, Greenblatt, after this most recent spate of attacks on Jews in New York, got on television and said, I'm scared, I'm frightened. That's not the way a leader should act. Next, so uncontested in the media in any serious way by America's most powerful Jewish leaders, anti-Israelism moved onto the campuses. In 2004, Avi Goldwasser, who is my partner in all of the activities that I do, whose films many of you have seen, and you should see them all, went with me to meet secretly with Jewish students who asked for the meeting at Columbia University. they told us that they were being harassed and intimidated by their professors in class whenever they challenged anti-Israel lectures or readings or assignments. We were horrified with what they told us. So we went to the ADL, do something, nothing. We went to David Harris, who is a man I admire because he's probably one of the most eloquent, if not the most eloquent, senior Jewish leaders at this time. But we went to him. He heads the American Jewish Committee. And we said, look what's happening. And we showed him film clips and we told him about what the kids were going through at Columbia University. And he said point blank to us, but we don't do campuses. We do diplomacy. Well, in a generation or two, he would be having to deal with the diplomats poisoned on the campuses that he didn't do. Jewish students were shocked when they came to the campuses. They were totally unprepared and undefended. They were unprepared to deal with the anti-Israel arguments and anti-Israel forces that they met on campuses. So this is the force field of how it works on the campuses, how you can win or how you can lose when you have a battle on college campuses. So college administrators perhaps are the most cowardly officials in America. And without pressure from our own leaders, they simply bowed to the forces arrayed against them. And here are all of the forces on the college campuses arrayed against us: the professoriate, the leftist student groups, the media, the Black and Latino radicals, communists, the Muslim student groups, the Arab student groups. All of those were making it very painful for any administrator to defend the Jewish rights to stand up for Israel, to defend free speech. These are all well-funded and very, very well organized. And you can imagine you would have to be a hero, college administrator, to take on that fight. And if you weren't being supported by the Jewish community, which you were not, we went and we begged them to come and help the students and to make this a public fight. They didn't want to make it a public fight. The ADL and the federations and the JCRCs, they didn't want to make it a public fight. You know why? Because they were afraid it would be said about them that they were against academic freedom. So rather than stick up for the Jewish students, they left the Jewish students, the bravest of the brave Jewish students, all alone on college campuses against an onslaught. And there were no heroes. I mean, maybe once in a while somebody did a heroic thing in terms of an administrator on college campuses. I didn't see much of that. Of course, later, when things really got bad, the Jewish establishment did fund the training of Jewish students. We got money from the David Project, from some of these groups, some of these establishment groups, not many. But again, the students were the ones that they let be alone on the campuses with their training. Avi Goldwasser made a film called Columbia Unbecoming. Please Google it. We interviewed the students on campus who described that they were being bullied. And we thought that film would wake up the Jewish community. That was 2004. We sent it all over. We begged. We went to rich Jewish donors who also happened to be on the board of Columbia University, and they felt too conflicted to do much except to speak behind the scenes. Nobody wanted to make this onslaught against Jewish students and pro-Israel students, not just Jewish, by the way, mostly, but there are others who are not Jewish and pro-Israel. This onslaught again, nobody wanted to make war. Nobody wanted to fight. And now, that was 2004. We tried to wake them up. A few woke up. Nobody big woke up. Some donors woke up. Now the situation is 100 times worse. I fear that after the Gaza war now, Jewish students will not only be shut up, but they will be attacked on campus. Next, the next thing that happened, I'm telling you this through kind of a Boston angle, but it is a national story because everything I'm telling you happened in every city. Here's a Boston example. I'm sure, I know it happened in almost every city. Hamas comes to Boston to establish a base. That's the Boston MEGA-MOSQUE. It's the largest mosque on the East Coast, even bigger than the one in Manhattan. So we found out, they set up shop in Boston. We found out who ran it, who funded it. It was an Islamist group pretending to be moderate Muslims. And they created the largest mosque on the Eastern Seaboard in Roxbury, Massachusetts, in the black area, next to the black area. On their board is a man named YUSUF Qaradawi, who at the time was, and still may be, the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood wants all the Jews killed. And if you would just click on YUSUF Qaradawi, you could see videos of him talking to throngs of Muslims in Cairo, in Syria, in Iraq, telling them that all the Jews have to be killed. And here's the guy who's going to be on the board of the mosque that is going to be set up in the Cradle of Liberty. The main organizational head for that for the Islamic Society of Boston was a man named Abdul Rahman al-Amoudi, who in 2004 was sentenced to 23 years for financing Hamas. So we did our research, we had it cold, we didn't make anything up. We called an emergency meeting of Boston's Jewish leaders. The Federation, the JCRC, the American Jewish Committee, the ADL. We showed them everything that we had. We said this is a direct threat to the Jews of Boston and to the general public, by the way, which, as you'll soon find out, suffered from this. You know what they told us? They told us they needed to be inclusive, to support diversity, to encourage interfaith dialogue. Some of them came to my house to watch on my computer the speeches of Qaradawi calling for the death of all the world's Jews, who was going to be the likely guide of Boston's Muslim community. Boston had a historically moderate Muslim community, but these people came in to radicalize them. And that was their goal. We have it, we found through a lawsuit, through depositions, we found all of their papers. We found later on who financed them, who they financed, terrorist to terrorist. We showed them how al-Amoudi was an operative. I showed him how al-Amoudi, whose task was to be the moderate Muslim reaching out to Jews for their support. They needed Jewish support because, you see, if the Jews in Boston supported them, then people who weren't Jewish had a right to logically conclude, well, the Jews have the most skin in the game here, and if they're saying they're kosher, they must be kosher. And the moat bridge was let down, and they all came in. And were treated by the Boston Globe and all of the liberal societies in Boston as good, moderate people, when in fact, the man whose job it was to reach out to the Jews, we found, or somebody found, he was writing Jew hatred screeds in Arabic papers. And so people wrote to them and say, well, how can you have a guy who writes that the Jews are so bad, being the ones who, and they said, it didn't happen, it didn't happen. Well, we have it here in Arabic. It's not true, it's a bad translation. So we brought the translation to Harvard's language department, and it wasn't a bad translation. So they finally said, well, he meant the Israelis. Sure, makes me feel better. So the response from the Jewish community leaders that we were in a froth, you know what they said? They said, Charles, do you want us to fight a Jewish jihad here? I said, no, but you ought to go to the mayor and you ought to tell him, the mayor who we supported, and tell him not to let these folks have a major institution in the hub. If the mayor actually knew who they were, he wouldn't have let them off the plane in Logan Airport, let alone almost give them for free a big plot of land. I said to the Boston Jewish leadership, tell the mayor not to subsidize the purchase of the land for the mosque. I got nothing back. Moral confusion, delusional. They're delusional. You know, they thought that, well, they'll be here, they'll become assimilated, like all the American immigrants. It'll be fine, you know. They were cowards. They didn't want to fight. And then we found in the curriculum, which was taught in that mosque, all kinds of Muslim version of Nazi hate. And now 14 people, I think there's another slide of the 14 people connected with that mosque, have been either killed or on the run, or they're on the run from federal authorities, or they're in jail. And in fact, the Boston Jewish leadership was wrong. Two of the congregants, you could see them, the Tsarnaev brothers right there, were the Boston Marathon bombers. So, gee, guys, you know, you were the ones who told the masses, the citizens of Boston, that they're kosher. Now they blew up the Boston Marathon. Wow, wow. So you should know this story, because I am sure that this happened. I know this happened in other cities, more or less along the same lines. Some Jewish activists, and not just Jewish activists, people who cared about Islamic radicalism, found out what was being planted in their cities. They went to the authorities, often to the Jewish authorities. They were told, you know, we only do diversity, inclusion, and we make nice, because if we make nice, they'll be nice. Great theory for a 3-year-old. The next slide is a book cover. So my former executive director, Ilya Feoktistov, documented this entire episode in a book called Terror in the Cradle of Liberty. The book names names and shames the cowards among Boston's Jewish leadership. It's in Amazon. Go get it. You want to get, this is how it's happened in every city. Next, the public schools. So the left and the Muslim radical organizations figured out a way to make and to insert pedagogically correct lesson plans, anti-Israel curricula in the public schools. It's part of the anti-Western push by the left, and it's part of the anti-Israel campaign by certain Muslim groups. We found it in Newton, Massachusetts, a leafy Jewish suburb of Boston. So this is a good one. Take a look at this. This is a PLO propaganda map, set of maps. It's very famous. You might have seen it all over. It's a set of maps, and it says this was made by the PLO. Okay, so and when they got caught, I'll show you why it's a lie, because this thing was never a Palestinian state. And this thing over here was not the Jews gobbling up Palestine, but this was occupied by Jordan, and this was occupied by Egypt. And nobody said they're occupiers. Nobody raised a BDS against Egypt occupation and Jordanian occupation, only when the Jews took land. Okay, so they backtracked, and they said these maps are for illustrative purposes only. So what did the curriculum in the Newton schools do? It erased the fact that it was PLO in origin and that the map was not real. Okay. The next thing they did was to insert the Arab World Studies notebook. Now, the Arab World Studies notebook is known to was exposed a long time ago by Sarah Stern of Emet, who's wonderful, and the organization is wonderful, as a huge defamational lie against the Jewish people, in that Newton students were getting to read that Jews killed Arab women in Israeli jails. Absolutely untrue. No teacher, we said, how could you, we went to, the grassroots, went to the Newton School Committee and said, how could you let that happen? Well, it's their narrative, right? Have you heard that? It's their narrative. The final thing that I just want to tell you what they did was they doctored the Hamas charter. Now, the Hamas charter, as you know, you should know, should get a copy, is not only against Israel, it is for the murder of every Jew on the planet. But what they did was, doctoring it, they took out every Jew on the planet language, and they made it seem like it was only against Israel. They changed the words. They changed the words. And in the teacher's manual of the Newton Public Schools, it said, listen, we got to have the kids understand that this is not a conflict about religion. It's only about land, right? So they doctored the map to cheat and to make a false impression about what the conflict is all about, because it is not a conflict about land, as anybody who studies this knows. Okay, so Israel, American school children are learning, and by the way, this is all over this is not just Newton, this is all over. And you can't easily stop it because teachers get their lesson plans from the web. And even a good high school principal can't monitor everything that's going on. And all the teachers unions now, as you know, are lefties, not all, but most. And there is a plethora of high school students, high school teachers that are for people of color, and Jews, of course, are not now people of color, even though we are. Half of Israel is Mizrahi. So this is a huge problem because the next generation we see it now. We see it now. American school kids learn that Israel is bad. Arab civilization, of course, is absolutely wonderful. Islam is the religion of peace. That's the lesson. So in this, we've been fighting to correct this for years. Grassroots groups led by a 97-year-old woman, Margot Einstein. Fantastic. You know, if there was 100 Margot Einsteins, we would win. So we went to the Federation and we went to the JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council, and the ADL and the AJC. And we showed them all of the proofs of what was in the book. And you know what they did? They said, you know, you're exaggerating. And that's what they told the mayor. So the mayor of Newton was told by the Jewish leadership of Newton that there's really no problem here, that we're exaggerating. And wow. I don't know. So recently, another grassroots group that you should become aware of, the American Israeli Council, AIC, took on this problem. They made good progress, but still we have the problem of not being able to know what every teacher teaches. And worse, most recent assault in the high schools is called critical race theory. Yeah. Critical race theory, which is now being inserted into school curricula across the country. It was spawned by the Black Lives Matter movement. It teaches that the Jews are not really a minority like the other minorities, like Latinas and feminists and Blacks, but we are white adjacents. That's a new term. I just learned that. They don't say we're white, you know, but we're white adjacents. And that anti-Semitism only comes from the right or is due to the Zionist occupation. So I know this is really, really a problem because it's in every city. The Jews will be swamped, even if if everybody were alerted today, it'd be a hugely serious problem. There are important organizations that are fighting this. I've yet to see a national plan from Jewish community leadership about how to fight it. Okay, lastly, the Congress. So we're losing the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the party of the American Jews, 70%, 80% sometimes. We've given them passion, we've given them loyalty, we've given them money. And I'll tell you one incident that says it all. So a little while ago, maybe a couple of years ago, after Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar defamed the Jews, you know, it's about the occupation and it's apartheid and it's about the Benjamins, baby. That's how Jews control the government with our money, our Benjamins. So many Jewish representatives and Jews around the country called for the Democratic Party to condemn them and condemn anti-Semitism. Guess what? They didn't do it. They didn't. Oh, here's what they did. Instead of condemning anti-Semitism and calling out the anti-Semites by name, right? They passed a resolution condemning every type of hatred, of human hatred since Cain and Abel. They had a laundry list of this long about all the hatreds against this, against that, against this. They had 20 hatreds, and they included anti-Semitism. Now, what they did say to the Jews is what they would never say to the blacks, who want them to say that Black lives matter, not all lives matter. You know, they don't, I mean, Black Lives Matter didn't want you to do that to them, right? But they did it to the Jews. They said to us essentially, all lives matter, all hatreds are bad. They wouldn't say anti-Semitism is bad, and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar were anti-Semitic, or said anti-Semitic things at least. So when your own party gives you the finger, you should digest this. A friend, Josh Block, who was a Democratic organizer for years and years, calls this moment when they didn't defend us America's Kristallnacht moment. It's a little dramatic, but we should know who is going to protect us. Who is going? Not even the Jewish representatives in Congress, except Zeldin, except one or two, made a fuss that their own party wouldn't say, their own party wouldn't call out the anti-Semites. Jewish leaders are terrified to fight for Jewish interests inside the Democratic Party. So, to sum up, in a way, from the start, Jewish leaders got this terribly wrong. They missed an obvious truth, expressed best by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. I think there's a slide on Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, right? And he said something that many people knew, but he said it, you know, as he did say things the most brilliant and eloquently. You know, he was the one who said things. Everybody should read his book, his commentary on the Torah every week. It's the most amazing set of books. He said anti-Semitism is a virus that morphs, that whatever is the most heinous crime in any historical era, that's what the Jews are going to be charged with. So under Christianity, we were the Christ killers. Under Islam, we were the deniers of the prophet. When racial science was accepted by society's elites, and it was in the 30s, Jews were vermin. When having a nation state marked people as worthy, Jews were deracinated cosmopolites. And now that globalism is in, and nation states are inherently racist, the Jews are racist because we have a nation state. So the attack on Israel, of course, is and always was an attack on the Jews. The disproportionate coverage of Israeli conduct is classical anti-Semitism. How did they not know that? How did FOXMAN not know that? They wanted to think of it as legitimate criticism of Israeli policy. But you don't have legitimate criticism if every day that's your obsessive focus. If every day that's your obsessive focus, it's not, if that's all you're talking about, it's not legitimate criticism. And if you're a Jewish leader and you do not understand that the new anti-Semitism, if you do not understand that Israel has been made the Jew of the nations in the same way that they hated the Talmud and the Torah and Jewish race, now they hate the Jewish state. If you don't know that, and you're a Jewish leader, then maybe you should have gotten another job. I don't want to be nasty, but maybe you should have learned to code. So here's where we are now. There's a diagram of threats. After decades of stewing American Jews and poisoned people about Israel and about the people who support Israel, this is what the Jews didn't understand. If Israel is doing bad things, really bad things, and if you are a Jew, most Jews support it, so you're a bad person. So this is a perfect storm, a four-front war. Four very powerful ideological sources and movements are aligned against us. The right, over here, the Muslims over here, the left over here, and the activists over here, the left over here. So this is a big problem. There's a perfect storm. And the Jewish community leadership only wants to see the danger coming from the right? They want to tell us that it's the Nazis are the biggest problem. There's no Nazi professors on campus. There aren't Nazis beating up Jews in New York. It's not them. It's not Nazis beating up people who are obviously Jewish in Brooklyn. But why do they want it to be the Nazis? For a couple of reasons. First of all, everybody's against Nazis. You know, there's no internal disagreement about that. And then that's kind of easy. Also, you could stay on the left if you want to tell people the lie that the problem is significantly, mostly from the right, and you don't want to explain to the Jews why can there be left progressives who are against Israel. You don't want to explain that, how that can be. So the four enemies, the right, the left progressive, the Islamists, and the Farrakhan-led Black Jew haters, this was the perfect storm that broke over our heads with the Gaza war propaganda campaign. Jew hatred is now surging and infecting mainstream America. Many American major institutions now believe and promote an anti-Israel narrative, which implies that American Jews and others who support Israel are doing evil. We will be attacked. This can only be seen as a catastrophic defeat. We need new leaders. Apart from the ZOA, we are one of the only groups, I think the only group, who think that there's a moral imperative to speak out publicly and tell the Jews that their leadership has failed. After all, what was their game plan? Their game plan backfired. Their game plan was, we're going to embrace the left. We love the left. We're going to support all of those groups, you know, the feminists, LBGT, Latinos, Blacks, et cetera, et cetera. Well, those are the people who we have spent lots and lots of money and resources and love and support and energy and creativity helping, and they're the ones against us now. They're the ones against us now. So if that was your strategy, if that was your game plan, you lost. We lost. We have placed ads in 16 Jewish papers and in Commentary magazine explaining this failure. And those ads are on the next couple of slides. So to the Lenin had a question, what is to be done? So first of all, between 25 and 30% of the Jewish community is really on our side. They think Israel is really important. They understand a little bit about the Red-Green Alliance, that it's a deadly foe. They understand that the left is abandoning us. Many of these people, the 25 or 30%, are members of great groups, grassroots groups, COA, Camera, Stand With Us, etc. Emet. But there's not a coordinated effort to galvanize all of these people together to challenge, persuade, and pressure our establishment leaders. So a group of us in Boston want to find you wherever you are, and we want to help you fight in your own communities to challenge Jewish leadership. We can help you. We have strategies, we have advice, we have curricula, we have letters that, you know, we know how to. We want the Jewish community to rise up and to tell its leaders, you bet on the wrong horse, your game plan backfired, you have to change, right? You have to change and put pressure on them. No one's pushing, you know. If you want to be part of this effort, please email me at charlesjacobs123@gmail. Make sure to put the word roundtable in the subject line. That's how I'll know that this is about this. Roundtable. We're at a tipping point. We must get active. Every one of us has to get active. How many years have Jews sat back and sent money to the big organizations thinking or hoping that they would take care of us? They did not. Their game plan was to embrace the left, to fit in with the victims of oppression. Well, as I said, it didn't work. It didn't work. The Jewish leadership game plan is in ruins. They had us bet on the wrong horses. Why would we ever listen to them again? We must and we can and we will, if we fight, overcome this. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.